special time right now. It's been 34 years since Clemson had a chance to win a national championship. 7 years ago when I got this job, I knew that we would be here. It's just a matter of when.
Welcome to the desert, Scottsdale, Arizona, right outside of Phoenix, the site of the second ever college football playoff national championship game.
That's right. Clemson trying to fill that void, not quite as deep as the Grand Canyon, but it has been a while, seeking that first national championship in 34 years.
But on the other side, Alabama, the Tide trying to roll to a fourth title in 7 seasons, a duel in the desert tomorrow night. Good evening and welcome to Scottsdale, Arizona. I'm Scott Eisberg alongside Daren Stoltzfus. Did you ever think we'd be here, Daren?
Absolutely. No. I think we knew Clemson had a shot at getting here, but we didn't think it would be this build-up, this magical, this pursuit of perfection, going 15-0. Nobody's ever done that, so to watch Clemson try to do that has been special.
And talk about mojo. This has been riding around on social media all week. Amazing. Somebody map-quested from Death Valley in Clemson to Glendale, Arizona. 1,981 miles. Are you kidding me? Of course, 1981, the last time Clemson won a national title. Clemson fans will certainly take that mojo. For some reason, I don't think Dabo Swinney is going to use that as any type of rallying point.
I wouldn't count on it, but what we have heard from Dabo this entire season is every week, every single week, this is the biggest game of the season. And finally, it is the national championship. There are no other games. This is the biggest game of the season.
This was our goal, was to have the opportunity to compete at the highest level. And, not only are we getting a chance to do that, but we're getting a chance to play, the University of Alabama, which, to me, has been the standard in college football for a long time. But certainly since Coach Saban has been there, they've just been incredibly consistent. And, so to me, this is the way it ought to be.
When you have good players and you're able to recruit good players and you do a good job of creating relationships and helping them develop, I think, the end result is you're trying to create value for them, and they are doing a good job on the field to create value for themselves as football players as well as the program and the team. And that's kind of been what we've tried to do, and that's the standard that we have.
We've been out here in Arizona since Thursday. We have heard these two coaches talk a lot, and it is amazing how different Dabo Swinney and Nick Saban are. Saban just stoic. Dabo, he's dancing all the time. He's cracking jokes. He is loving the spotlight.
And you could tell that from this morning. Both those guys just done talking. They've talked to us enough over and over again. But Dabo Swinney, he's got so many ties to the state of Alabama. He was a walk-on, grew up in Alabama, eventually earned a scholarship with the Crimson Tide, actually won a national championship while playing for Alabama, but playing against his alma mater. He coached for Alabama, too. Can't forget that. Playing against them for a national title, pretty special.
This is their 4th national championship in 7 years. So we want to be the best. So let's go play the best team out there and see if we can get it done and measure up. If we're good enough to get it done, we'll get it done. If we're not, then we'll go back to work and keep working. So I think it's exactly the way I would have wanted it to be.
For Clemson, this is a season that started with sky-high expectations, 15 for 15. Dabo Swinney's squad responding. They haven't lost since last season. Deshaun Watson still unbeaten in games he starts and finishes.
When we go to work, we work. We clock in and we get our mind on our business. And these guys want to play well. They take pride in their performance. You don't luck up and win 17 in a row.
Every week called the biggest game of the year, whether Wofford, Appalachian State, Louisville calling, and it was 14 times the Tigers taking down their foes. A couple close calls, but this team pursuing perfection.
It's the next step. That's really all it is. It's the only thing we haven't done. You got a big challenge. I mean, you got to slay a dragon Monday night now. I mean, this is a lot easier said than done, and everybody knows that. And if it doesn't go our way, we're going to stay relevant. We're not going away.
Now it truly is the biggest game of the year, maybe the biggest in program history. Clemson on the verge of a second national title, 4 quarters away from winning the ultimate trophy in college football, but even bigger, proving to the world the Tigers, they belong. there's no question the guys in crimson belong. For the Tide, we've seen this before.
Coach Saban and what he's done, I mean, he's one of the greatest coaches that's ever coached the game. I mean, regardless of what happens to Monday night, you can't argue that.
But this season, an early, maybe wacky loss, threatening to cripple one of the most physical teams in college football. But luck, talent, maybe even fate reigning supreme. The Tide kept winning. Ole Miss kept losing, opening the door for another Alabama SEC title. And for the fourth time in 7 years, another national championship title game appearance. They're 3 for 3 in those under Nick Saban. But the Saban of old, not the Saban of now.
I certainly have a little more patience now than I had before. I mean, when I was first a coach, some of these questions that I've been asked today, I would have responded to a little different.
The Tide rolling, setting up a colossal showdown. Number 1 versus number 2. It could shape up to be a game for the ages.
Now, Daren, we've been doing this for a long time. We've covered a ton of bowl games, but this is not a bowl game. These two teams played bowl games last week. They played the Orange Bowl. They played the Cotton Bowl. Those were bowl games. This is the exact opposite. This is a business trip.
The celebration that is the bowl game is completely different than what happens here at the national championship game. When you watch this team approach this, there's no trips to Dave & Buster's like there were down in Miami. This is about the game.
Clemson and Alabama, just one practice each here in Scottsdale. Media allowed in for 15 minutes. Dabo calling it about a Thursday practice during a normal game week, but a normal practice, not at the base of those beautiful mountains. Not a bad place to get a little work in, but if they wanted, they actually could do more than just a little work. The Tigers needing and getting an NCAA waiver because of the 20-hour week. When these schools are in session, coaching is limited to 20 hours a week. Clemson is in school now. Alabama is not. Ultimately, not an issue. The NCAA giving that waiver, no significant advantage for Alabama.
But there could be a significant advantage if this guy can't play. Sunday morning, Dabo Swinney saying Shaq Lawson still trying to give it a go tomorrow in the big game. Here he looks a little uncomfortable. This video from yesterday at practice. But Dabo says he looked good later in practice. They're calling it a game time decision. Could be a factor tomorrow night.
Just ready to play. It's been soaking in our head all along, and to get the opportunity to play for a national championship is just a blessing.
What's it going to take to keep you off that field Monday?
It depends on how I'm feeling, how my knee going, because I want to play and everything. Just depends on how I'm feeling right then and trying to get back better and get stronger.
A big loss for the Clemson Tigers coming on offense for this game. Their second-best wide receiver, Deon Cain, suspended for the rest of the season during Orange Bowl practices, along with kicker Ammon Lakip and J.J. McCullough. Those two are done. Cain can work his way back onto the team, and he is back at class at Clemson, but he's really hurt his team. He's not able to play, suspended for both the Orange Bowl and this national title. Several reports say it was a failed drug test for Cain, who as a freshman reeled in 5 touchdown catches. He was the Tigers' biggest big play threat.
And the reason he is because the Tigers missing this guy, Orangeburg County native Mike Williams, the biggest big play threat, lost not only in the first game of the season against Wofford, but on the first drive of the season. He scores the touchdown, but crashes into the goalpost station, and he breaks a bone in his neck. Huge blow for Clemson on the deep ball. Williams, a big-time NFL prospect, says he'll be back next year, but Williams, who lucked out avoiding paralyzation, he's seeing this run from the sidelines.
Oh, yeah, I wish I was out there right now, but the injury could have been a whole lot worse. But I just wish I was out there on this big stage like this. I mean, who don't want to play in the national championship against Alabama? So I'm just taking it one day at a time and just ready to be back out there.
How big of a difference do you think you could have made in this game?
I mean, we was going to have the same offense, just probably would have been another playmaker added to the offense. That's just it.
It really is amazing just walking around Media Day who you see out there. Everybody in the sportscasting world is there. Of course, Reese Davis, he is the face of ESPN College Football. He hosts College Game Day.
I felt like Deshaun Watson. You're walking around and everybody from ESPN's hanging out with you. But yes, Reese Davis, one of the most iconic faces in college football. I caught up with him yesterday to get his thoughts on the big game. Joined by Reese Davis. We'll be doing a smorgasbord of things for ESPN on game day. But Reese, you've seen both these programs up close with College Game Day. You know the fans. What do you expect in Glendale come Monday night?
It'll be an intense, physical game. Obviously, the Clemson fans will be really excited to be here because it's been a long time since they've been on this type of stage. But, they've won so much recently, and they've won ACC championship games and played in big bowl games and played big-time programs. I don't think that they'll be overwhelmed or awed by the moment in any way, shape, form, or fashion, any more so than Alabama will or anybody else is in a Super Bowl or whatever when you get to a big game.
We've seen so much talk, and we've talked about the differences in personality between these two football teams. Seems like Clemson has a little more fun. Alabama's a little more business work-like. Jake Coker said we have fun, too. You've seen both programs. What do you think?
I think he's exactly right. I think it's a misconception that we get sometimes when we only have limited access on both sides. For instance, to your point, I asked Ben Boulware today, I said, what really ticks Dabo off? What can send him into orbit? And he told me a couple things. He sort of laughed about it, but everybody has this thing that Dabo's always happy, happy, joy, joy. And he gets ticked off and yells at guys too, not just punters who run fake punts on their own. He yells at a lot of guys, and that's because he's a coach. That's the way it goes. So, I think that there are far more similarities than differences, although there are certainly some. Everybody's got a coach and lead their program in reflection of their own personality. And when it's time for Nick to have fun, he has fun. But when he is in the football building or on the practice field, he goes about it a certain way, and his team wants to go about it a certain way. And he's in tune with his guys just as Dabo's in tune with his guys.
So Monday night, 1 versus 2. What's going to be the key? They're both so close. They're both so different, it seems like. What do you see being the difference?
I think the number one thing to me is when each team gets red zone opportunities, can they cash in on them? Particularly, I think that goes for Alabama when they have the ball. If they get into the red zone, they haven't been particularly efficient at scoring touchdowns in the red zone over the course of the year, and Clemson's been very good at stopping it. Can they take advantage of those opportunities? On the other side, I think for Clemson, it's getting some chunk plays, whether it's in the running game or passing game outside the numbers, which is where they statistically have been really difficult to defend. You're not going to move it on Alabama consistently, getting 5-6 yards at a time. You got to get 35 in there or 45 occasionally.
You've seen games of this magnitude. I mean, it's only the second college football playoff national championship, but what changes? What makes it not just a regular football game when it's elevated to this status, or is it just the same?
No, I think the stakes make it different, and depending on the way the game goes, sometimes you can see a team, if things aren't going well, they start to press a little bit. I think actually you probably saw it in the 2 semifinal games. And then the fake punt changed the momentum. Then Clemson scored, and they got some confidence, and then a couple things went wrong for Oklahoma, and they started tightening up a little bit. I think those types of things, how you respond when something goes wrong, and something when you have two teams like this, inevitably, something's going to go wrong for both of you. All of those intangible factors are probably just as important as to whether Alabama can stop the run and stay in a too high safety look. I think that stuff is just as important.
Awesome. Appreciate it, Reese.
Right.
Thank you so much. Stay busy.
Hey, Cecil.
Clemson going for its first national title in 34 years. Alabama looking for their 4th in 7 years. See what happens.
Obviously, history in this series does not go Clemson's way. The Tigers have not won a game against the Tide in over 100 years.
Well, these two teams don't meet that often, but yes, Clemson's last win coming in 1905. The Crimson Tide have won 12 straight over the Tigers. Their next meeting just more than 24 hours away. We're back in about 3 minutes.
Turn to See You in the Desert, Pursuit of Perfection. Presented by George St. Country Lawyers.
Welcome back to Scottsdale, Arizona. Beautiful night in the desert. And when you're playing in a national championship game, you're playing with weapons. There's no doubt about that. And this could be the best 1-2 combo of weapons on these two teams in the country.
And they were almost 1-2 in the country. Both those studs, Derrick Henry and Deshaun Watson, in New York as Heisman Trophy finalists. Derrick Henry brought home that trophy. Deshaun Watson placed 3rd. But Watson not too concerned about that. He'd like to bring home the big trophy at the end. Cool, calm, and collected. And just a sophomore. He's a guy that's never lost a game that he started and finished at Clemson. Injuries haven't been an issue this year like they were last season. Watson setting the ACC all-time total yards record at the Orange Bowl. Lots of, 4,731 yards on the year. Impossible to pick whether or not this guy will run or pass.
On the other side, you know exactly what Alabama will do with Derrick Henry. Run, full steam ahead, just the sheer size and speed, intimidating, 6'3", 225, running downhill at you, 25 touchdowns for him this year. These two know each other well from the Heisman Trophy tour, mutual respect, but they play their own games.
Just do what we do, and I just, we don't focus on that. At the end of the day, it's 11 guys on the field, so it doesn't matter who's on the field. As long as we do our job and execute, everything else is gonna be fine. So we can't focus on just players. We got to focus on our job and everything else. It doesn't matter who we play; it's how we play. And if we play good and execute, we should have a good chance to win the game.
I really like Deshaun. Got a lot of respect for him. I'm saying just because he's been through a lot of adversity and overcame it in the right way. He's a hard worker, and a very humble person, and just getting to know him, that experience with the Heisman and things like that, and being in Atlanta, just somebody can, call a friend, just understanding his story, his mom and things like that. I just gained a lot of respect for him, just being with him those past weeks.
For Porter Gaudgrad and Isle of Palms native Stanton Seckinger, it all comes to an end with this game. What a roller coaster ride it's been. The small Skeeza school in Charleston, he was brought in a recruiting class of wide receivers, Martavis Bryant, Sammy Watkins, Sharon Peak. He moved to tight end, and what a roller coaster ride it's been for Stanton and his family. When you ask Stanton Seckinger if he can believe the long and windy road he's been down, the answer is quite simple.
No, not really, honestly. I mean, everything's kind of happened so fast, but yeah, it's it's unbelievable. It's a dream come true. It's something you dream of as a kid, and for all the hard work to pay off, and finally be in the game is it's really special.
But through the ups and downs of a career, game-winning touchdowns against Georgia, and then in the Orange Bowl against Ohio State, to injuries that have sidelined him much of this, his 5th year, his parents, Terry and Stan, have experienced it with him, not missing one game, home or away, documenting every bit of it. The emotion runs deep.
We're just proud of him for the person that he is. Just like on signing day, we were proud, really, for his character, and that hadn't changed at all.
From where he was to where he is, the transformation incredible, and off-the-radar prospect, to say the least.
When he was in high school, he said, Dad, I think I want to try to play college football. I want to get a scholarship. I said, yeah, you might be able to do that. I said, you might, who knows, there's some small schools. And he said, no, I want to play where when I play, if you don't come to the game, you can watch me on TV. I said, oh, okay. Yeah, but this is so far beyond what I expected that it's been great.
It's just been an incredible journey to see all of that and to go to a national championship. We just are so excited, and really, quite frankly, I think they're going to win.
He'll say goodbye on Monday night. They'll say goodbye as well. An emotional ending for all.
Their support is unreal. That's part of what's helped me get through these injuries, but obviously also the last 5 years of college. So every time that I've had my highs or my lows, they've been right there for me to support me and to back me up, and to have that kind of support is really important, and it's helped me out tremendously.
And if anybody knows the tremendous amount of Dabo Swinney-isms, it's probably Stanton. We've heard them all year, 15 for 15, all in. BYOG, this is the biggest game of the year because it's the biggest game this week.
The BYOG was reinvented by this guy this week. We went to the Grand Canyon. The bring your own guts is Dabo Swinney's thing. He brought his own gloves.
Well,
somebody gave him bright yellow gloves. But as for those cliches that Dabo loves to throw out, how about looking ahead to next game?
Well, we do have the spring game coming up, so some guys might be distracted, a little disappointed in that. No. Yeah, we've been saying that for every game, and it's finally true. And so I think that just that approach has been really good for us. I think that, week in and week out, we've just had that kind of mindset, and now that we're finally here, nothing's different.
Absolutely. Eric McLean obviously speaking a little tongue-in-cheek there, but This is not tongue-in-cheek. Coming up, we're going to talk to a Walterboro native who is the Tigers' long snapper.
Absolutely. Jim Brown, what a year for him. What a head of hair, too, the mane. We sit down with the Colleton County native, talk to him. We catalog his emotional journey through this season a little later on. And you don't want to miss this. We'll bring in an Alabama expert.
It's 26 years covering the Crimson Tide, plus we're huddling up with Post-Courier's columnist Gene Sapikoff talking Tide and Tigers. But before we go, another George Sink injury lawyer's key fact of the case.
Clemson is on a 17-game win streak right now. That is the longest active in the country. It is the second longest in ACC history. That's our George Sink injury lawyer's key fact of the case.
We now return to See You in the Desert, Pursuit of Perfection, presented by George Sink Country Lawyers.
Welcome back to Scottsdale, Arizona. We are live. We're joined now by ESPN senior writer Ryan McGee. He's a fellow Tennessee volunteer.
That's right.
We're going to talk different orange, though, talking Clemson orange today. Ryan, you spent some time in the Palmetto State. You lived here for several years. Or not here, back there.
Yeah.
But you've covered Clemson a lot this season. You had two cover stories. The All-In story that came out today on ESPN.com about Dabo Swinney. The Daboisms, also the Deshaun Watson cover story in the magazine. Watching this team develop, it's not your typical ACC Clemson team from 20 years ago.
No, and develop is the right word, because if you think about the team that we saw in September, and it was the Deshaun Watson show. It was him, and we knew it going in. If he could stay, we said it, you go back and look at all the preseason stuff in August, it was if he could stay healthy and he has to figure out how to get everyone else involved, they can win ball games. It's exactly what he did. You know, there are names that we're talking about now offensively at Clemson we didn't even know, in August and September, and it's because Watson has brought them, into the game plan. So, yeah, and absolutely, listen, I lived in Travelers Rest, South Carolina, go Devil Dogs, in the 80s, and my dad was an ACC official, and the Clemson that we all grew up on, for people my age, and the Clemson now, it's night and day. And it's two different approaches, but it's two different conferences and two different coaches. But it was it's exciting to see that fan base who were very patient for a very long time finally have this great weekend.
When you look at Clemson from a national level, we know now that over the past 5 years, two teams have won 10 games or more, Alabama and Clemson. Yeah. But from a national standpoint, how do people see the Clemson Tigers?
Well, I think they see them way differently now than they did. When the whole Clemsoning thing happened, right. and that was unfair. I mean, but the reality was that it wasn't about what Swinney had done there. It was about the 15 years before that. When he won the championship, or they won the championship in 2011, it's been 20 years. And it's hard for me to wrap my brain around that because it was so good, in the 80s and the early 90s. But Ken Hatfield was the last guy who won the conference championship there. So that's what you were dealing with. And so to see, I think their national, their stature with writers, with other people that aren't familiar with it, it's been interesting to watch it change over the last couple of years. And it goes back to #Clemsoning, and fair or unfair, that's what it was. And most people's experience with Clemson was New Year's Day weekend or whatever bowl game they were in. And for a long time, that was a bad showcase for Clemson. And now, obviously, it's the opposite of that.
Well, talk a little bit about your article. The #AllIn has kind of replaced the #Clemsoning, if you will. What was Dabo talking about in that piece?
Well, it goes back to, we zeroed it into the day and even the hour. It was 4 o'clock on that day in October. I think it was October 13th in 2008. And that Monday morning, Tommy Bowden had been fired, and Dabo Swinney was called into the athletic department office and basically was told, okay, you're the interim coach, and he tells us now, he was told, you're going to have a chance to win the job. And so he immediately called a team meeting. Brad Scott told me the story, and he called the team meeting and said, listen, I'm in. I'm all in. And the next 6 games are going to be really hard, and however long I have this job, if it's the end of this year and I'm gone, or if it's whatever, who's in? And he said, we're practicing at 6. So if you're all in, show up at 6. And he honestly believed that some folks wouldn't be there, and everybody showed up, and they've been showing up ever since.
And a great story Dabo told at the Orange Bowl in the press conference. He talked about driving into the parking spot for the head coach's spot for the first time, and he saw his college number on the stone right there, and he said that was kind of when the doubt left, because he was having those second thoughts, too.
Yeah.
You have to, you think about that. But when you look at Alabama, how do they challenge Clemson? What is the most difficult spot for Clemson on the field tomorrow night?
The front seven. And it's almost a misnomer to call it Alabama's defensive front seven, because it's really their defensive front 14. You know, what they have done dramatically different over the last couple of years versus what they had done historically at Alabama. They've always been big and strong on the defensive line. Now they rotate guys in. It's like the NFL. And they've got so many talented players, they rotate them in, and that's the problem. You know, on that one particular side of the line where you got a true freshman, you know, on the end, and that's where the hard part's going to be. And again, it's going to be up to Deshaun Watson to eliminate those guys. He's going to get hit. That's just going to happen. We saw it last weekend. We've seen it all year. He's got to roll out. You know, he has to single-handedly widen that field and get those other players involved, because that front seven, defensive front for Alabama, those are the game changers. It's the best defensive line versus the best quarterback in all of college football, and that's what you should have in the national championship game.
For a guy who's filled in for Paul Feinbaum, you know the SEC pretty well. You know the ACC pretty well. You probably talked to Danny Cannell about that. Does the conference clash that's coming up, is this anything other than Clemson's number 1, Alabama's number 2, or does this carry through to the strength of the ACC, the strength of the SEC?
Now listen, I'll never forget the genius of the Peach Bowl, the Chick-fil-A Bowl, what we're calling it now. When they first did that contract, gosh, you know, almost 20 years ago, and it was ACC versus SEC. And I went to I went to probably those first 5 or 6 games, and even if it was Mississippi State,
some great New Year's Eve plans.
Oh yeah, well yeah, right, yeah. Thanks, babe. But you know, even when it was like Mississippi State, North Carolina, the ACC chant and the SEC chant, and Clemson has always been the DMZ for that. You know, they've always been right there in the middle of that. And you know, the ACC for years was a basketball conference, and Clemson was a football school, and the SEC didn't really want them, and so Clemson's always kind of been that, you know, that what swings between the two. So yeah, I think it's genius, and I think that people are going to see a crowd at this game with those two fan bases. And you know, listen, I'm a Tennessee guy. You're a Tennessee guy. You know, if you're a real Tennessee person, you don't root for Alabama, but
you root for anybody but Nick Saban.
What the SEC has done, though, is they've created this conference pride. And when I talk to guys that cover the Big 12 or the Pac-12, that doesn't exist anywhere else. And so it's a conference thing. And the ACC has done that, you know, based on that. And so it's really, the ACC-SEC chance will start probably early and often on Monday night.
It'll be fun. Tomorrow, I believe the Crimson Tide somewhere around a 7-point favorite. I won't ask you to pick the game, but I will ask you, is that fair? Or how do you see this game mounting tomorrow night?
Well, I think it's fair, but my pick is Clemson. And I'm not just saying that because I'm on here today. I'm sticking with, we just did our picks on ESPN.com, and we got everybody's picking Alabama except for me. I haven't checked in with Cannell yet. I assume he's going to go Clemson, but everyone is picked Alabama but me, and I'm sticking with Clemson because, again, all Deshaun Watson is being asked to do is to completely take over the game and win the championship. Well, guess what? He does it every week. Yeah. Listen, I understand that Alabama's not North Carolina, but you were there, and you saw when it was time to take over the game, he did what great players do. He took over, and if he can do that on Monday night, and he's going to have to do it early, I think Clemson's the favorite.
And I think that was one thing at the Orange Bowl I was looking for that did not happen.
Right.
But the defense and Wayne Goldman did take over, and they blew him out in the second half. Ryan, appreciate the time.
Anytime, buddy.
All right, sounds good. Well, the ties to the Low Country are not just the players, but how about the coaches? Scott Eisberg checking up with some of the coaches that run deep, deep roots into the Low Country.
Take the field on Monday night, eyes on the offense. The man at the controls, James Island High grad Tony Elliott.
The biggest thing is just trying to get ready to play a ball game. I think it'll set in that this is a national championship, but just like I've done all year and just like these guys have done all year, man, we're in it together. We're trying to put together the best plan for these young men to be successful. We don't care who gets the credit as long as we find a way to get the job done.
A first-year co-offensive coordinator, his rags to riches story well publicized, but this is business. And you have to wonder if nerves can work into the head of a guy calling plays for only the 16th time in his career.
Last year, I was nervous going into the Oklahoma game, but, you know, calling plays versus Notre Dame, Florida State, ACC Championship, the Orange Bowl last week has kind of given me some opportunities, you know, to work in my craft. And I'm sure that once we get to the stadium, there'll be a little bit of nerves, but I don't have time to be nervous because these young men are counting on me to be on my game to give them a chance to be successful.
This offense sure to lean on their Heisman finalist QB Deshaun Watson. Watson taking his cues from QB coach Brandon Streeter. Streeter honed his chops for 2 years coaching at Charleston Southern.
Well, I'll tell you what, it was an unbelievable experience there at Charleston Southern. You learn to do a lot of different roles when you're in a program like that, and you just learn to appreciate the game of football. That you don't get everything handed to you. Everything just doesn't come easy. And so you learn to develop, obviously, your relationships with your players, which is the most important thing. But you learn to have fun as a coach, and that's what it was at Charleston Southern for me.
And of course, if the QB is successful, it's because of the O-line. They're coached by Robbie Caldwell, a long and prosperous career, a career that started in the 70s coaching at Hanahan High School.
It's a lot of fun, I tell you what. I can thank Buddy Jennings. It's now Dr. Jennings. He retired as superintendent of schools, but a special man. And guys like Myron Reams, oh my goodness, we had so much fun going to work every day. And that was one reason I wanted to stay in coaching. You know, the rest is history. Been doing it a long time. My daughter said yesterday, Daddy, it took you 40 years, but you got here.
The road for Clemson leads here to Phoenix. Many of those roads run right through the Low Country. As for Alabama's assistant coaches, a very interesting group of them, the coordinators especially. Leading the defense is Kirby Smart in his final game at Alabama. One of the most sought-after coaches in the country. Right after the season, Smart took the Georgia head coaching job. A huge step for him, but the big question for Smart, balancing the Alabama defense with his new responsibilities in Athens. It's a major undertaking, but one that Smart has taken pride in doing.
It's tough to manage both, you know, but I take pride in giving the same amount of time that I've always given to the Alabama players of game planning, adjusting, but certainly when I would have been recruiting for Alabama on the phone or internet or whatever, Twitter, I spend all that time on Georgia with the recruiting because, I mean, at the end of the day, coach is still recruiting here for Alabama just like I'm recruiting for Georgia. So that time gets offset. But as far as the commitment to the players, it hadn't dropped any. If anything, I'm trying to make sure they know I'm giving them everything I got every day and a lot of energy out there.
Then the other guy coaching Alabama's potent offense, it's a guy that knows a thing or two about head coaching. How about Lane Kiffin? Gamecock fans know him. The Palmetto State comments on recruiting tactics while he was a head coach at Tennessee. I was there for that burning match, just watching, not actually burning. But Kiffin and Saban seem to work. Alabama, that potent offense, he's giving the ball to number 2, Derrick Henry, a Heisman winner, giving autonomy to Jake Coker at quarterback. Overall, a good fit Kiffin is with that offense, preparing for the national title, something he cherishes, just doesn't like talking about it. Not exactly like his Cotton Bowl preps. That's a game Alabama won 38-0.
But this game's much more like a regular season game, Phil. Maybe like having a bye week so you have a little bit of extra time, but it's not at all like a bowl, Phil, where you have bowl practices that are irrelevant to the opponent that you're playing. This to me just seems like kind of maybe having a Thursday night game after a Saturday, 2 before, so kind of a week and a half. So have a little bit of extra time, but that extra time is about the opponent, not really about just making ourselves better.
If you think this is an exciting, a daunting test for the Clemson Tigers, you may be right.
Absolutely. All of the huge games Clemson has been in this season, there have been many. This is the first to feature teams ranked number 1 and number 2 in program history. This is a top-tier title game tomorrow night. See you in the desert. Pursuit of Perfection returns after this.
We now return to See You in the Desert, Pursuit of Perfection, presented by George St. Country Lawyers.
Welcome back to beautiful Scottsdale, Arizona in the desert. And what an interesting postseason it's been. There's one guy you usually don't talk about in a postseason special, the punter. Yes, we're talking about Clemson's punter, Andy Teasdale.
Andy Teasdale making national headlines, of course, in the ACC championship game and in the Orange Bowl for different reasons. But how about this, Scotty? He was a lacrosse player, an All-American lacrosse player in high school.
In the ACC title game, Teasdale with an ill-advised, self-advised fake punt, literally tucking and running with no direction, a play that turned it over, led to a North Carolina touchdown, a touchdown that could have cost Clemson the game. He was ripped publicly by Dabo Swinney for minutes on the sideline on national TV. Talk about redemption. Teasdale coming back in the Orange Bowl and making a huge momentum boost for Clemson, completing a fake punt pass to Christian Wilkins, which led to a touchdown. What a story Andy Teasdale, the punter, has been all postseason.
Yeah, it certainly feels good. A little redemption, but, you know, you got to take the good with the good and the bad with the bad and try to stay even keel as possible. But certainly for that, the last image to be good. And then, you know, we won both games, which is the main thing, and then I got a chance to do something special Monday night.
I mean, the punter doesn't usually get the notoriety that you seem to have. Did you expect that by any stretch of the means coming into this home stretch?
Absolutely not. Just trying to do my job as and contribute. But some things happen, and God's plan. You got to just take it and accept it and keep pushing forward.
Now, Andy Teasdale's roommate is his long snapper, who just happens to be a Low-Country native, Jim Brown from Walterboro, from Pinewood Prep, a tiny private school guy. He's gone from unknown to known this season. Walking around National Championship Media Day, pretty much like walking around campus for Jim Brown.
He's a social butterfly. He kind of knows everyone on campus. Yeah, everyone knows me as Jim's little sister, so.
Jim Brown has never met a stranger. A bit odd sometimes, purely Jim all the time.
Oh, especially not as a long snapper. You know, my job is kind of to be anonymous, and that I've done that well for the football aspect, but got some publicity outside of that, which has been cool. So
highlights of Jim on the field may be hard to come by, but before this season, he caught Dabo Swinney's eye, and that started to catch America's eye.
His fifth year, his last time, because he didn't quit, because he hung in there with it, man, he's got an opportunity to play for the Tigers, and he's going to get a scholarship to do it. So, really happy for Jim Brown.
Actually, my accountant called me and said, "Hey, Jim got a scholarship." I said, "Are you kidding me?" And so I called Jim, and Jim said, "Yeah, I'm on scholarship. Don't tell Mom."
Good news is I'm on scholarship. Yes. I swear.
Well, once again, I was in Bilo in the frozen food section, and he's like, "Mom, I got put on scholarship." And I was like, no way. Of course, I immediately just started crying because I couldn't believe it. It was just the greatest thing for him because he'd worked so hard, and he finally felt like he'd made it, and he was, 100% part of the team.
That viral video then, later in the season, Dabo Swinney making Jim a captain for the Syracuse game for namesake reasons. What a year. What a ride it's been, ending right here in Arizona, a long way from Pinewood Prep and tiny Walterboro.
You're kind of not trying to think about the game yet, just kind of enjoying the moment right now, but it is, man. It's an incredible experience, so I'm just trying to soak it all up.
And no doubt, Jim, with fans in the Grand Canyon State.
Oh, yeah. Well, we had to get a new credit card, but we're going to Arizona.
I hope that one day I can be, half as good as parents as they've been to me. They've supported me this whole journey and never given up on me. And, I don't think they missed a game this whole season, which in itself is incredible. I mean, they've flown to Syracuse, flown to Miami. I mean, just been there to support me all throughout the way, and I cannot thank them enough, man.
Yeah, Jim said they might need a new credit card. Hey, he's on scholarship now. He saved the parents' money. It's all good. But, Scotty, there's going to be some fans that are maybe a little divided on this because, how about this stat?
The ties run so deep between Clemson and Alabama. How about this? Clemson's 3 winningest head coaches ever are all Alabama natives. Frank Howard, number 1. How about Dabo Swinney, number 3? And number 2, of course, the man who won that national championship, Denny Ford. We'll be back after the break with Mike Rada from our Birmingham affiliate and the Post and Courier's Gene Sapikoff.
Return to See You in the Desert, Pursuit of Perfection, presented by George St. Country Lawyers.
Welcome back to the desert, Scottsdale, Arizona. We're now joined by 2 guys we respect immensely. Mike Rada, our affiliate down in Birmingham, Alabama. He's the sports director, and Gene Sapikoff, of course, from the Post and Courier in Charleston. And we've got to ask Mike first, what is the feeling in Alabama right now? Do they think this is a walkover against Clemson, or do they respect this ACC team?
Well, there's no question the Alabama fans are always confident about their team. They've got a lot of confidence because they just don't lose very often. They've only been the underdog one time this season. That was against Georgia, and then they went out and hammered the Bulldogs. After coming off that great win in the Cotton Bowl against Michigan State, which was total domination, I'm not going to speak for the Alabama fans, but I'm going to speak for the Alabama fans. I think that they believe that Clemson will be a walkover for them.
And, Gene, on your side, what do you think? Clemson fans, it's not exactly the same thing, but it's very close.
I think they feel pretty good about this just because they've played Notre Dame, they've played Florida State, and they're just coming off their best game of the year against Oklahoma, a game they were underdogs in.
Best half, probably.
Yeah, 37-17 though against an offense that came in with Baker Mayfield, Samaje Perine, and Joe Mixon billed as just tremendous. And you know, how was Clemson going to stop these guys? And they held them to 67 yards rushing. So, I mean, I think there's confidence there. On the other hand, let's face it, it's all gravy for Clemson from here on. They got here. I'm not saying they're just happy to be here, but this was a tremendous step for Dabo Swinney's program. And going into this season, guys, next year was going to be the year. And, I mean, with almost everybody back on offense, plus a tremendous running back coming in, Tavian Feaster, they don't even have probably two of their three best receivers right now, Mike Williams and Deion Kane. There's a lot of good things that will come out of this game, win or lose, for Clemson fans.
I'm going to ask this to both of you. Deshaun or Derek, who do you go with?
Well, you're putting me in a tough spot there, Scott, because I voted for Derrick Henry for the Heisman, and I stick with my vote. I think if you had a draft among college coaches, though, most of them would take Deshaun Watson simply because the really good quarterback is better than the really good running back at almost every level of football.
That's interesting because I voted for Chris McCaffrey with my Heisman vote. I didn't vote for either.
Did you hear about that?
Yeah, exactly. No, I didn't make that public. I'm only saying that because we're on in South Carolina, not in Alabama. No, but seriously, I think Derrick Henry is the kind of guy who can ice a game when you get in the fourth quarter. If Alabama goes into the second half, into the fourth quarter, especially with a lead, I really like Alabama's chances with Derrick Henry. But here's the thing. You heard Kirby Smart earlier in the week compare Deshaun Watson to Johnny Manziel, Cam Newton, and Nick Marshall. Those are three pretty good players, and all three of those guys beat Alabama in their first try. Now, they lost the second time they played, Manziel and Marshall did. Newton only played them once. But with Watson's ability to do so many things, I think it's kryptonite for Alabama.
Mike, I want to ask you this. The common theme, or at least what Clemson fans have been saying, it seems like, is Alabama struggles when they play mobile quarterbacks. Who is the best quarterback Alabama's played, and how does he compare to what they'll see tomorrow night?
Cam Newton. I mean,
but not this team. Maybe this season.
Oh, you're talking about this season. I would guess you'd have to go with Chad Kelly from Ole Miss. He's the one who had the best statistics against Alabama, made more plays happen. Now, he got a lot of help from his wide receivers. He also got some breaks with balls bouncing off of helmets and into receivers' arms. So, but I would think it would be Kelly from Ole Miss.
Former Clemson quarterback,
yes.
Interestingly enough.
Gene, I'll ask you this. Shaq Lawson, if he doesn't play, how badly does that hurt Clemson tomorrow night?
Well, it's going to be tough because, as Mike was talking about, Derrick Henry can ice games. Alabama's outscored every opponent they've played this year in the second half. They just kind of wear you down. And Jake Coker, since that Mississippi game, has really taken care of the ball. So overall, that Alabama offense, Scott, is as scary as that rattlesnake I saw under your rental car back there. But I think, Lawson only had one tackle and one sack against Oklahoma, and Austin Bryant and Richard Yeargin played so good, behind him, alternating, that Clemson was able, again, to hold Oklahoma, Samaje Perine and Joe Mixon and all those guys to 67 yards rushing. That was, 130-some below their average.
The thing I'm most, wondering right now, in Alabama, what are the thoughts about Dabo Swinney? If Nick Saban rides off into the sunset with a national title, if he goes to the NFL, is Dabo Swinney the first phone call Alabama makes?
It absolutely should be the first phone call, and if Dabo Swinney is smart, he'll turn it down. You don't want to be the guy that follows Nick Saban. You want to be the guy that follows the guy who follows Nick Saban. Obviously, Dabo is one of Alabama's favorite sons. He'll always be revered there, but right now, he's not their favorite guy. They want to beat him like a drum. As
different as those two coaches are, how do you change a program so drastically if Dabo Swinney is the guy at some point at Alabama?
It would really look different. Nick Saban has kind of sealed it off. It's almost a kingdom unto itself with walls around it. That's not to say that he hasn't been accessible. He's been very good. But I thought it was interesting today. I think the first 14 minutes of the news conference were dominated by Dabo Swinney. I think he spoke for 10 minutes, 50 seconds, Nick Saban for about 2 minutes and 40 seconds. And I think that just shows you that the power of language that Dabo Swinney always talks about, he has that. He has a solid message, similar to Nick Saban's one voice, and I think he would fit in. It would just be different.
Not going to ask you to pick the winner, but if you were to pick a winner tomorrow night, who would it be, Gene?
Well, since you're not asking me, I guess I'll go Clemson 27-24. And the reason I'm doing that is Alabama's had a few slip-ups at Mississippi. I just watched that Tennessee game on tape the other day. You know, they looked very vulnerable in that game. And Clemson just hasn't lost, and Deshaun Watson has not lost a game in his college career that he started and finished healthy. So I'm going to lead toward Clemson and take a shot there on the Tigers winning. I realize they're the underdog, but I think they'll keep it close at very least.
Okay, Mike, you want to do it?
Well, I was going to say both the Ole Miss and the Tennessee games were a long time ago. Alabama has gotten better every week since then. I think Alabama's going to win the game 23-10.
Mike, thanks so much for your
Scott,
time.
my pleasure.
Mike Rada from our Birmingham affiliate, WBMA. And there's Gene Sapikoff from the Charleston Post and Courier. You can read all of his stuff tomorrow and, of course, after the game. As for guys who are going to be playing in this game, Wayne Gallman could be the X factor in the game. You don't hear about Gallman as much because of the running back that Alabama has, Derrick Henry, but boy, Gallman just bounces off of people. He has great shiftiness in his legs. I like that word, shiftiness, but he really does gain yards. He really does gain yards after he's hit, and Gallman really can be an X factor for Clemson in this game.
We're really trying to take it all in, but not let it overwhelm us. It's just a blessing to be here. Can't do it too much, but it is a focus, and we try to, relax as much as we can, and really just take everything in and just be with our team.
What would that, lifting that trophy behind you, what would that mean to you Monday?
Mean everything. Just to even bring it back to Clemson, it mean a lot.
So here we are. We're just ready for game time now. We're about 24 hours or so. It's going to be a fun one tomorrow night. Looking forward to watching it with you, Daren.
Absolutely, Scotty. And I heard Ben Boulware say earlier this week, he just hopes that this is, low expectations. He hopes this is the best college football game of the season. I kind of agree. I hope we get a good one tomorrow night.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for joining us, and enjoy the game, everybody.